What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the Pro Football Focus show titled Fantasy Slant, brought to you by, us here at Pro Football Focus. It is week 14. We're now at the fantasy playoffs, so waiver wire is as big as it's ever been for those teams that may have eked their way in. Maybe they suffered an injury in week 13 and they're looking for someone to replace that player. Maybe they've just had a lackluster team that's just kind of walked into the playoffs. But we're gonna talk about all those situations. We're gonna talk about everything as we always do on the show here. But it was kind of funny, guys. So every week we had a spreadsheet, and I updated for the show. And I was flying last night through the night, and I edited it before the game started, and I had Ryan Fitzpatrick in there, and I had him as my number one option for a streaming option this week, only to get off the plane and find out that Ryan Fitzpatrick was benched at halftime. He was playing bad, which is kind of Ryan Fitzpatrick of 2016. So I thought it was kind of funny, guys. I have my usual trio with me here. I have Marianne Lee, I have Daniel Kelley, and Nathan Jahnke of Pro Football Focus. We are going to, as we always do, we're going to break down every single position, talk about streaming quarterbacks, but you guys have any fun takeaways from week 13? Anything that really stood out to you? Brandon, I know before we started you were throwing me a bone on Tyler Lockett, saying kudos, but I noticed that none of you haven't ranked as high as me again, so you're all going to hear it again.
Sarcasm, my friend, but I did think of you. I did share. I was like, he got his one game.
And Daniel, we got to talk about Colin Kaepernick, buddy. He's your guy.
Hey, I'm going back to it this week, so we'll get to that. I put almost all the blame on this on Chip Kelley. I don't take anything away from Kaepernick here.
I'll probably disagree with you. That's probably going to be a fun disagreement. Nathan, any big takeaways from you for week 13?
I'd stick with the Kaepernick one. You guys talked me into it week after week, and last week he was finally our consensus number one. I started him in two of my leags. One of them he scored me positive. The other he scored me negative. So
yeah, he did that.
Oh my God. You know what's funny about Kaepernick?
That was an epic implosion, though. One completion. I mean, no one could have predicted that. That was crazy.
It's true, and that's the thing. But I actually had a conversation earlier in the week, like saying that I could never feel comfortable with Colin Kaepernick going in as my playoff quarterback, because I think I just watch football from an actual, not a fantasy perspective. Like, I watch the player and I want to believe in a player's talent over his fantasy prospect sometimes. And I said, there's going to be a game where people say, where Colin Kaepernick like literally blows up your fantasy team, and you're going to say, what did I expect? It was Colin Kaepernick all along. And I'm still at that point where, like, now that you're in the playoffs and it's a one-game elimination, how can you trust Colin Kaepernick, Daniel?
He's had the game now. You said he's going to have the game. He had it. Now he's good.
But do we even know if he's starting this week?
Well, we don't. Obviously, if they don't start him, it's a whole different topic.
Yeah.
But God, he's facing the Jets. The Jets looked like a bad college team last night. I'm whatever quarterback they use.
No, you're not going to do the Alabama thing, are you? You're not going to do the Alabama.
I'm exaggerating. No, that's silly. No, the Jets would destroy Alabama. I know.
I was like, this is an analytics site. We just cannot say that out loud.
No,
Jeff would come after us with a fork.
I'm exaggerating, but no. Whatever quarterback faces the Jets, I'm using them in DFS, spending the price, all that. Assuming Kaepernick has the job, and he should have the job. As bad as he is, he's still better than Blaine Flippin Gabbert. He needs to be the starter, and he needs to be in fantasy lineups. Not all of them. I'm not going to start him over Andrew Luck this week, but God, I'm using him in some places. I'm using him over Brock Osweiler in the league where I have that question.
Oh, well, Brock Osweiler, that's a whole different bag of tricks, and we don't want to spend our entire time talking about bad quarterbacks. But let's start our show where we always do, guys. We're going to talk about some streaming quarterbacks for Week 14, and ahead of our chart here is not Colin Kaepernick. It is actually Joe Flacco. He's going to be playing at New England. Nathan, let's talk about Joe Flacco. Why is he your number one quarterback this week? And, if somebody's streaming quarterbacks, what can make them feel comfortable about using him?
I think he's the safest option out of the group. He just had his best game of the season fantasy-wise, 381 yards, 4 touchdowns. I don't think he'll do that again. But he's had a minimum of 210 yards each game this season. More often than not having at least 250 yards, averaging a little more than a touchdown per game. So I think he's the safe option if you want to make sure you're getting some points out of your fantasy quarterback this week.
I'm actually with Nathan on this one. I had, like I said, I had Fitzpatrick there at number 1, assuming that he was going to start this week. That's not happening. So I actually would say Flacco's my number 1 quarterback too. Before, Jared Goff kind of imploded against the blitz in week 13, the Patriots had allowed 3 touchdowns to Russell Wilson, 2 to Kaepernick, 2 to Ryan Fitzpatrick, the one that we talked about. So Joe Flacco, I think he's a solid, safe floor option. Because, New England's going to pass. They're going to put points up on the board in this Baltimore pass defense. Brandon, who is your number? Who's behind Joe Flacco for you, streaming-wise?
I mean, I guess Colin Kaepernick, and you do it because you're hoping for him to bounce back against a Jets defense that looked like. I mean, when you're giving up 3 touchdowns just to Dwayne Allen alone, what do we say? What do we say? I'm shocked at what happened last night, and I would say that more than anything, Colin Kaepernick was showing that he had a very high floor going into last week, where he completed 1 pass coming from San Francisco, playing in the snow and the conditions and what have you in Chicago. This was the first week where we had to deal with weather, and it overwhelmed me. And I was drugged up, and I wrote an entire rambling piece about weather that I begged Daniel, our editor, to let me redo because everything is free this week on Pro Football Focus. So go check it out. But I was like, this is a disaster. I just was so overwhelmed and had a cold that I could not even compute life. So I think there were a few different, conditions that were happening there. I'm okay with this 18-point floor. I think it's coming back against the Jets. So yeah, I mean, listen, again, we talked a little bit about, quality versus fantasy, not to be rude about it, but let's be honest, he is not a high NFL caliber quarterback when you're watching the game, looking at the analytics from a team perspective. From a fantasy perspective, it's nice because of the way fantasy scores. The running helps.
Yeah, well, Colin Kaepernick, I thought it was funny, right before the game started, the news came out that Colin Kaepernick is not going to discuss, he wants to become a free agent and not just re-sign with San Francisco. And I thought it was funny because, I always appreciate it when players bet on themselves, and it seems like that's what he was doing. Only to go out and have a game like that was kind of comical. I watched that game, actually. So I had a baby shower this weekend. We went back to Chicago, and so I was there at the bar, kind of commingling with the guys and the girls, because a lot of the guys showed up. And I was watching this game, and Colin Kaepernick was bad. A lot of people may say that it had to do with the game plan or whatever. The snow was definitely a factor. It was snowing all day there. It was sticking everything. But Colin Kaepernick, the issue as it was last year, is he wants to run first. He was dropping back to pass. He was holding onto the ball too long. It was just an ugly game from Kaepernick. I'm not going to say that one game deserves him to be benched at halftime or in the third quarter like he was, but yeah, but he did play poorly. It was a bad game on his part. Let's talk about the player. Daniel, you and Nathan need to talk to me about this. I don't get it. You guys have Matt Barkley here as the number 2 streaming option in front of somebody like Kaepernick, in front of somebody like, I guess I can't say anything about RG3, but what makes you guys excited about Matt Barkley?
It's cute that you use the word excited. We're talking about a group of quarterbacks that includes Bryce Petty and Robert Griffin III.
Yeah.
I'm not excited about Matt Barkley, but I'm less excited about Bryce Petty. You have him number 1, and that's kudos for being bold, but I don't see that at all. He graded out just as poorly as Fitzpatrick last night.
Oh, no, I just didn't change that. It was Fitzpatrick's name in there. Okay. It was changed. Believe me, okay, I'm not starting Bryce Petty.
All right. It's a matter of, Barkley's had 2 weeks of marginal productivity. The Lions' defense has improved. I still don't think it's a good defense. I don't know. It's not a matter of being excited. I promise you that. It's a matter of being less excited about the other options.
Well, so the Lions, Nathan, let's talk about this because the Lions have been a different defense. Since week 6, they've played Kirk Cousins. They played against Bortles, he is Bortles, but they played against Breeze. They haven't allowed a team to score more than 20 points since back in week 6. They've had 6 interceptions over the last 3 games, just 2 touchdown passes. What are you seeing? Is DeAndre Levy coming back? I don't believe in Matt Barkley, the player. I think that he came into the starting job against a Titans team that had allowed 26 points in at least, I think it was 5 straight games. And then he played against a San Francisco team that's allowed 30 points to basically everybody. So, I'm not excited about Matt Barkley.
Yeah, well, we were talking earlier about people doing well in fantasy versus doing well in real life. And in real life, Barkley's been outplaying these other quarterbacks. I know it's against bad defenses on just a 2-game sample size, but he's playing better than what I expected him to. And it's a Bears team that I expect them to be losing. I expect them to have to drop back a ton, which should lead to a decent number of points. So I think because I expect there to be a lot of garbage time where Chicago's stuck throwing, and Barkley has looked good, avoided some bad throws, has thrown 3 touchdowns the previous week. And if his receivers would just stop dropping passes, his stats would look even better. So that's why I like Barkley better than some of the other options.
And now, well, I'm starting to worry about his options in the passing game too. Marquise Wilson went down in the first quarter. It was a hamstring. I don't know if he's going to be available. It's an ugly situation when Josh Bellamy and Cameron Meredith are your number 1 and number 2 receivers. It's not a good thing. So I have my concerns about Barkley. The Lions, our opponents, average just 61 plays per game against them. That's kind of like what they did against the Saints a little bit. They controlled the time of possession, and that's what they've been doing. And that's why I think Matthew Stafford has got a lot of praise because of what they've been able to do with the ball control on offense, despite not having a real run game. So let's move on to running backs because quarterback's just an ugly situation. It's one where, honestly, it's kind of like defenses where if you streamed them all year, it's not a great week. So hopefully you got a bye week. But let's talk about some running backs. Our consensus number 1 here is Ty Montgomery. And yes, I put him in running backs because he has running back eligibility on every site now, I believe. Brandon, are you excited about Ty Montgomery? Is he somebody that you'd plug into your lineup confidently, or are you still a little skittish?
No, I'm very skittish. He's a dart throw only, and for me, it's DFS only. Because every single week, the Green Bay Packers have a different number 1 wide receiver and or weapon. Whether that be Jared Cook, whether it's Devontae Adams. I mean, look at what Adams did to his fantasy owners last week, after being a baller for weeks on end. They just change every single week based off of what game script they decide to go with. So it could be a Ty Montgomery week. It could not. And his floor is very low. We know it's like 1 to 3 points, depending on your scoring settings. So to me, he's much more of a dart throw or a DFS kind of GPP play. That'd be great. But as far as, how great I feel about it, no. And, I've talked about it numerous times. We all have that, kind of this zero running back and everyone waiting. It's been really difficult because every week we do these waiver wires. These are our options.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like Ty Montgomery's our option. The guy barely even is a running back. So, yeah, no, I don't feel good about it just because Green Bay is consistently turning over their talent as to who they use each week.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a guessing game. It's almost turned into the Saints. Jordy Nelson has been the only one that's been – I guess Devontae Adams has been somewhat consistent, although this week he didn't really do much. Daniel, what's your take on the situation? James Starks, I think he played just a couple snaps. So they've obviously moved on from him. Kristen Michael is not really showing anything like massive in terms of talent-wise right now. So where are you at with Ty Montgomery?
It's a dart throw. I think his versatility is what makes him more appealing than some of the other guys on our list because he is going to be involved in the passing game and the running game. I'm just about as excited about him as I was about Barkley at the quarterbacks. But like Brandon said, there's just not a lot at the running back position right now. I actually had Montgomery as my number 2 streamer of the week because the rumors are Charles Sims will be back this weekend, and Charles Sims actually has a role in that offense already carved out, especially if Doug Martin's not healthy. But Montgomery, it's just a matter of his versatility against a lot of less appealing options.
I just think Ty Montgomery fits that offense for what they're trying to do. I think he's a multi-dimensional threat. Like he can catch the ball out of the backfield better than James Starks. I think he's a better running back at this point. Kristen Michael doesn't really do much in the passing game. He's new to the team. I just think that they're nuts for not using Ty Montgomery more. Their offense was working very well with him in the backfield. Nathan, what's your take on that? I noticed that you have Jerick McKinnon above him in your rankings. So what about it? Is there anything that scares you about Montgomery, or is this more on McKinnon saying that you like him a lot?
It's a combination of the two. One thing with Montgomery also is he's facing some pretty good run defenses these next few weeks, so a little worried about that as well. So you'd really be depending on him as a receiver. And the Packers, like we've said, they kind of change who they're throwing a lot of targets to each week. It could be Montgomery, but it could be a number of other options. Where McKinnon, he's been playing pretty well recently, football-wise. He's had 7 players miss tackles on him these past 3 weeks compared to 7 the previous 10 weeks. Yards after contact per carry has been above 2.5. each of these past few weeks. So he just needs to break one long run, and his numbers would look a lot better than they've been looking. And he goes up against some average to below average defenses. So I think McKinnon, with his playing time, all he needs is a big run, and he should be able to put up some good numbers.
Now, Brandon, what's your take on McKinnon? All right, like he has been running a little bit differently from the patient runner that we saw earlier in the season that couldn't find any holes. This offensive line still doesn't create very many holes, but what's your take on McKinnon going forward with he's kind of putting his head down and kind of going forward. He's doing more in the receiving game. So is he someone that you would like more than Ty Montgomery?
No, and because this was the first week, I believe, since their week 6 bye, the Matt Asiata hasn't outscored him from a fantasy perspective. So again, if we're looking at fantasy points, I completely agree with Nathan from like a football perspective and like a tape perspective, but they just still give Asiata those goal line carries. One touchdown isn't going to change my mind, in 1 week of football. So unfortunately, he just doesn't have that touchdown upside. And because of the offensive line, I just don't trust them at all. I'm a little bit unsteady about him. But yeah, sure. At Jacksonville, then Indianapolis, you love that. At Green Bay, and then Chicago in week 17, if that's a thing for you. So, the schedule certainly is more favorable than that of, Ty Montgomery this week going up against Seattle, certainly. But I have Jarek just one ahead of Ty Montgomery, but to me, neither of them excites me as much as your guy, Derrick Henry and Charles Sims.
Yeah, Derrick Henry. We could talk about him and Sims. So basically, Sims, do we know of anything? Like, I heard he's supposed to be activated off the IR. I don't know if that means he's going to play because obviously, as we've seen in the past, players are activated off the IR, like, someone like Deion Lewis, where he didn't play for a couple weeks. So I don't know if that's the situation with Sims. Does anybody here know if he's actually expected to play, or is this just kind of like being activated in case he's ready in a couple weeks? You know what I mean?
Last I saw, he was activated. They're not positive he's going to play this week. But with Martin getting hurt in the game, plus Cecil Shorts and Adam Humphries both going down, if there's any chance he can play, he's going to play. I don't think there's going to be any easing him back in as they're driving for a playoff spot.
I don't think they're going to push him, though. So that would be the only thing that I'm saying is Jacquizz Rodgers, they're fine leaning on. They have no problems. And if you look, Jacquizz Rodgers...
He's actually outplayed Doug Martin in his starts.
Yeah, he really has. He is our 6th highest graded running back right now in total score on Pro Football Focus right now with a 78.1. Jacquizz Rodgers is surprisingly good this season. So I don't think they see Charles Sims as a big part of their future. So they're not going to do anything to risk that knee. But I'm under the impression that Charles Sims looked good and healthy. So then they will play him. But I don't think they're going to, just because Martin's out, I don't think they're going to do it. I think what I'm trying to say is Charles Sims does play, I think he'll be fully healthy because I don't think they're going to rush him. And that's good news for us. Then we'll know.
Yeah, no, that's true. One player that Brandon mentioned that I like a lot, and honestly, he's been someone I've been keeping on my benches for a while now, just waiting to see if anything ever happened with DeMarco Murray. I think Derrick Henry is the ultimate bench stash. I think he's more valuable than Alfred Morris. And I know a lot of people like Alfred Morris as the best handcuff or D'Angelo Williams. I think Derrick Henry is that. I mean, if you watch the game against the Bears before their bye week, Derrick Henry looks so much better than DeMarco Murray. Murray hasn't looked the same since injuring his foot. He really hasn't. Outside of that one run against Green Bay, he's averaged sub 3 yards per carry. He couldn't get anything going against the Bears defense that struggled over the last couple of weeks. And Derrick Henry, as I mentioned, he just looked better. So for me, I like Derrick Henry a lot. Who else do we got here running back? Here, before we get to the next one that we have ranked, let's talk about Justin Forsett, guys. For those of you that missed the news, Capri Bibbs is going to be out for the season. He was placed on IR. We all know that Devontae Booker has been extremely bad. Like, ever since taking over that role that everybody said that he was going to take over C.J. Anderson, which was nonsense to begin with, he has not done anything. I know he scored a touchdown this past weekend, but he didn't look very good. That was one where he was kind of pushed into the end zone. It was odd. But let's talk about Justin Forsett. The Denver Broncos went out. Gary Kubiak is familiar with him, obviously from his days in Houston, from his days in Baltimore, when Justin Forsett was a thing, and now he's in Denver. Nathan, let's start with you. How do you feel about Justin Forsett? I'm of the mindset where I think he's going to start getting 10 touches a game at least.
Yeah, I could see him getting those opportunities. My only concern is he has been dropped from 2 teams already this year. And the Broncos' offensive line in terms of run blocking isn't as good as some of the lines that Forsett has played in the past. So I think he's worth a gamble, but you're not starting him this week, and then there's only 2 weeks left of the season. So If you have that spot on your bench, if you're in a situation where like you've had 2 quarterbacks, but you know you're only going to start one of those quarterbacks for the rest of the season, and you can drop the other quarterback, then I think he's someone that you can add, but he's not someone that I would trust this week. And if I'm not trusting him this week, then I'm a little more concerned about picking him up.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Is just like I would like to give it a week. Obviously, I think he's definitely a pickup where you grab him, you let him sit on your bench, and you see how the touches pan themselves out. Because I was going through it, Devontae Booker, ever since week 8, there hasn't been a single game where he's averaged more than 3.3 yards per carry on the season, just 2.4 yards after contact. He's only broken 11 tackles on the year. I mean, Jay Ajayi broke 7 tackles this weekend on like 12 carries. So, Daniel, where are you at with the whole Justin Forsett thing? Do you think he's going to be a thing?
I think there's a chance he'll be a thing. I think we didn't have him in our spreadsheet because this was sort of a late ad, but I'd have him over Ronnie Hillman, Bilal Powell, Paul Perkins, right in there the range of Mike Gillislee, just on the interesting factor. They don't have much else right now. With Bibbs out, Anderson out, Booker disappointing. I mean, you can't use him this week in your fantasy playoffs. It's just too risky. But there's a definite chance that he's going to be really involved this week. There's even more of a chance he can be really involved next week. He's minimum priced in DFS. If you're punting this week and splurging on wide receivers, I could even see using him in DFS. I'm not sure if I could pull the trigger myself, but there's definitely an argument for it.
Yeah, like a tournament play. Whereas if all of a sudden they're just like, Booker, we've seen enough of you, and we're kind of okay. It's weird with me with Booker though. They have almost not played into Booker's strengths. Like Nathan, are you with me on this one? Where out of college, Booker looked like he was a fantastic receiver. And I thought that's where he was going to excel. He was playing third down role with C.J. Anderson, and it just made sense. Devontae Booker looked really good as a receiver, but they're not targeting him at all in the passing game. I don't get it.
Yeah, it looks like none of their running backs this year, even C.J. Anderson, when he was healthy, they're not putting anyone in a situation to succeed there, which is why part of my concern is no one's been succeeding regardless of who's been taking the snaps at running back.
Yeah.
And I have a warning. Guys, Capri Bibbs wasn't getting 10 touches a game.
Right.
Ever. And before C.J. Anderson got hurt, neither was Devontae Booker. So they don't like to spread it around. I mean, we can say that they should give up on Booker, but they would actually have to give up on Booker for Forsett to get 10 touches because they just haven't done that all season. So
I wouldn't rule that out. I mean, Kubiak.
I don't think they're going to do it without Forsett, seeing what Forsett has first. I mean, I don't think this is the week he'll get 10 touches because Booker hasn't been good, but neither have a lot of people on that offense. So, I mean, kind of pick your poison. I just, Kubiak is not someone that splits carries that way. He does split snaps perhaps, but not carries and touches. I mean, literally no one gets double-digit targets or touches unless you are the featured back, and I just don't see him doing that week 1 with Justin Forsett. So that's just a Kubiak thing that I just wanted to say, and maybe they do, but so far we haven't seen that.
Yeah, and kind of looking at the matchups too, considering they're not using very many in the passing game, honestly, they all may be a waste. I didn't even realize it. So this week, obviously, with him just signing, it's probably not very much. It's not in the probability that he will see those 10 or more touches, because this is the only week you'd want to use them against the Titans. Then they have the Patriots, and then in week 16 they have the Chiefs with Justin Houston back, who have been really good against the run. So yeah, I understand. Brandon, what about Paul Perkins? We saw him. I know we've talked about him this show before. I know Nathan's been a fan for a while. Brandon, you were talking about him staying after practice, working with the offensive line, like on his pass blocking. Yeah. He's been looking like a better running back. I really don't understand why New York is so hesitant to feature him more, because I think Rashad Jennings is just the guy.
I think the Giants have a lot of offensive problems that people have not been talking about because we do have real East Coast bias in terms of sports media. That's the only thing that justifies why no one's talking about it. They've had a lot of problems with their, offensive line, with protecting people, with getting the ball out, scoring points. I mean, pretty much all of the metrics, they're having some issues. So I just don't see them making the change. I agree with you. I think he does look better. But if you need someone that's going to get you about 30 to 40 yards, he's the guy. But other than that, he's yet to score a rushing touchdown, a receiving touchdown. He's done once, and that was in week 4. Unfortunately, there just isn't any kind of boom there for, for fantasy owners to link to unless something happens to Rashad Jennings. And even then, they've been very weird about it. So I don't know why either. I agree with you. Real football, again, I think that with a lot of these running backs, we're like, yeah, Devontae Booker, why not try something else? But Kubiak doesn't do that, and with the Giants, for whatever reason, they're just not believing in this guy. So I think you stash him just in case, but I don't know if I feel good starting him yet. At all.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. It's just every week, it's just like weird. He had more work than he's ever had this week, and he obviously looked fine doing so. So I'm curious about it. But Daniel, what's your take on Paul Perkins? Do you like him, or is he somebody you'd rather let somebody else deal with the headache?
I like him in Dynasty. I can't envision a way I'd be using him in 2016, short of Jennings going on IR. I just don't think there's anything there right now.
Yeah. And the last thing before we get off the running backs, Nathan, I wanted to talk to you about Bilal Powell. You have him as the highest running back among all of us. So is this something where you think that the Jets are just moving away from some of their veterans? They want to play some of and I mean, at this point, I think Bilal Powell is considered one of the older veterans, but is there anything that tells you Bilal Powell is going to play more going forward?
It's just, I think the Jets will be losing in games, so I think he'll be seeing over 50% of snaps, and someone like Perkins has only at most been seeing 40%. Some of these other guys are just backups where Powell at least is going to be on the field. We know that much, and he just needs to be targeted. But even last night, we didn't really see him targeted or running the ball much compared to what he was doing even earlier in the season. So he's not someone I trust, but if you're in a very deep league and you need someone because someone got hurt, he's someone who will at least be on the field and have the opportunity to get touches.
There you have it. So our running backs there you guys do. As we've done, we're going to talk about the wide receivers next, but before we do that, let's get a word from our sponsors. All right, guys, this appears to be like one of the bigger wide receiver weeks. If you didn't grab someone like Malcolm Mitchell last week, I bet you're kicking yourself. I know I tried to grab him in a lot of my leagues. I was unfortunate. I did not have success in doing such. But it was more of a speculative ad. I wouldn't have wanted to start him last week because he had played less than 50% of the snaps the week before, but now he's playing more snaps than like anybody. So, Daniel, you have him at number 1 in your rankings. What gets you excited about Malcolm Mitchell? Do you think this is a thing going forward? Like, what do you think the reason is that Malcolm Mitchell saw a big jump in his snap count this week?
I mean, he was a popular sleeper guy in the preseason before he messed his arm up. And for a while, everybody thought he was going to be done for a long time. He's been getting healthier. So I can't say he just got fully healthy. It's been a long time. But, rookie who got gradually healthier in an offense that he's learning more and more, that just lost one of their top targets. I mean, I don't know about starting him right now, but the way his usage has increased week by week, he can't sit on your wire. He's someone who could be a difference maker in week 16, maybe in week 15, and you need to have him right now. And depending on your lineup, he's a starter, but he's a big part of a great offense.
Nathan, do you think this is going to be a volatile situation with him, or do you think he's going to be a consistent producer?
I think he can be a consistent producer. It's just that he can continue to see the playing time. He has been seeing the targets when he's on the field. So the fact that Tom Brady trusts him enough to throw him the ball as much as he has been is definitely a big thing for him. It's just a worry if Bill Belichick decides one week, okay, this is our strategy for this week, and he's not on the field as much, since we've seen Bill change what he's doing based on his matchup more than most coaches. So that's probably my only concern with him at this point.
Brandon, do you have any concerns with Malcolm Mitchell?
No, in fact, I'm all in. I think that he and Pierre Garçon, to me, are two people that actually have roles in their offense moving forward that I feel confident starting as my wide receiver 3 every week. Because Rob Gronkowski's injury is huge, you guys. And Martellus Bennett is not 100%. I don't care what anyone tells me. And their wide receivers go in and out of being questionable as well. They've all been dealing with issues as well. So, and Tom Brady continues to deal with injury issues, to be entirely frank. So they need Malcolm Mitchell. I think that, yes, I agree. And, with the Patriots, there's always going to be a week that one of these guys are written out completely, and it's going to be infuriating. I mean, obviously. But we're getting towards the end of the season, so they don't have many more options. So I guess for me, I'm still okay with Malcolm Mitchell. I'm sorry, you get double-digit targets and you're on the waiver wire list, pick them up.
Yeah, so before I get into Daniel and Nathan, I'm going to pick a bone with them. Brandon, where do you stand on this? Like with between Tyler Lockett and I'm going to have you rank these guys, all right? So rank me Tyler Lockett, Chris Hogan, and Dontrell Inman.
Okay. I'm going to go Hogan. I think I'm actually, because I'm looking at my stuff here and I'm like, I should maybe change this. I think I'm going to go Hogan, Inman, then Lockett. But the reason why is because it just, the gadget thing with Lockett really concerns me. That's not going to happen every week. They're not playing the Panthers every week. What a disaster. But I think Inman might have to get more involved depending on what happens with Williams and Benjamin both going in and out of being healthy again. And then Hogan just plays on a better offense. But I now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, maybe I even put him lower because I believe Malcolm Mitchell is going to get more points than Hogan. Like, to me, it's not even close. I would rather have Mitchell than Hogan. But
That's the point that's the part where I'm at. It's like you have to pick one. You can't just say both are going to keep producing going forward because that would almost eliminate production from Deion Lewis, James White, LeGarrette Blount would even a little bit. Martellus Bennett would continue to be in the gutter. So there's just like so much going on around that situation. But you guys,
Hogan's been dealing with injury too, though. So that's the thing. Like, the Patriots have been dealing with really weird injuries for all the pass catchers. So that's been affecting everybody, right?
It has, but you guys having Chris Hogan over Tyler Lockett, you guys are smoking crack. Daniel, tell me why? What did you not learn from Tyler Lockett? He now has six targets in 3 of the last 4 games. They are using him on those gadget plays. If they have to do that, that's like a bonus. But if you're seeing 6 targets a game from Russell Wilson to a guy who over the last couple seasons has completed over 70% of his targets to wide receivers, 6 targets is pretty much almost in line for 5 catches a game. So I just don't. I don't know. I like Tyler Lockett. I'm betting on a revival here. I think he's healthy. I think he was not earlier in the season, and we're seeing him to actually start to have fantasy relevance.
I mean, some, but you say, 6 targets a game is going to be good for 5 catches. This was his first 5-catch game. He had 6 targets and no catches, 6 targets and 3 catches. This is Russell Wilson's second worst graded season, not by much. He's always been good. It's his second worst pass graded season. They faced the Rams in Week 15, the Cardinals in Week 16. It's tough matchups. I think it's going to be focused on Baldwin and Graham, and Lockett's going to get the scraps. He's not going to have these gadget plays again. So if you're telling me he's going to be good for 50 or 60 yards maybe, and you're hoping for a score, I just think there's more upside in some of these other guys.
Well, Chris Hogan, to be fair, I'm going to bring this up because we need to have this argument. Chris Hogan has not seen 6 targets in any game, and there's actually only been 3 games where he's seen more than 4 targets. That's my thing. Is like, if you want to say Lockett is going to be a little volatile, I get that. I get it. But I don't think a wide receiver on the waiver wire, outside of maybe Malcolm Mitchell, maybe presents more upside. So I think Tyler Lockett. Now, Nathan, I'm curious where you're at on this debate, like with Chris Hogan and Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, a lot of it's just the schedule and who those teams are playing these next couple weeks. If you have a team that's playing in Week 17, then Lockett's probably going to do just fine against the 49ers, but we'll probably see a decent amount of Patrick Peterson in fantasy championship weeks with the Cardinals. The Rams have a good secondary all around with their cornerbacks and safeties, so it's mostly matchup dependent, where I would probably need to see another good week out of Lockett before I feel confident starting him. And by the time that could happen next week, it'll be when he faces those good secondaries when you need it the most, where the Patriots, while they do play the Broncos in there, they do have some opponents that I could see him being a good high upside guy because, he's had some weeks where he hasn't done well. He's also had some 100-yard weeks, and it's a situation where they don't have that many people left to throw to. So he could have a big week, he could have a bad week. So depending on how risky you want to be, I think he's someone that could be worth the risk if you want to put the risk in.
Also, I want to say Tyler Lockett has yet to go over 70 yards receiving and yet to score a receiving touchdown. Chris Hogan has 3 receiving touchdowns, 3 games of 70 or more yards, and 6 games of 4 catches. I mean, he isn't getting the targets, but when he is targeted, he's catching them, and he's often catching them downfield and or in the end zone. And that's a huge departure from what Tyler Lockett's been doing all season. So, yes, one big game, and certainly that big, beautiful gadget play. Again, I applaud you, my friend. I saw it, and I was like, my man, Mike, he loves this. But it was one play, unfortunately. So for me, if we're looking at, like, where the actual ceiling is, if you take out the one game outlier, it's just so much higher for Hogan for me.
I like Hogan more than most people, I think, do. And honestly, I think I like I think that him and Mitchell are closer than people think. They both play on the same side of the field a lot of the time. So the Patriots went with Danny Amendola getting hurt. It kind of changed things. I don't know how long he's going to be out, but they both can produce if that's the case. If Amendola misses a lot of time. But yeah, Hogan is another one. He doesn't need very many targets to produce because with Tom Brady as the quarterback, there's only been 4 incompletions that have gone Hogan's way. Again, he hasn't seen very many targets, but that's my concern. One player that I know, Nathan, I know you're high on. Brandon, you mentioned it. Talk about Pierre Garçon for a minute.
Well, I mean, listen, the guy has a really great game log going right now, and the guy's still available playing against Philadelphia this week, which is a really nice matchup for wide receivers. I mean, you want to talk about targets. This guy has 5 or more targets in all but one game this season. I don't even understand how he's still out there. The other thing is, he has only one game of over 100 yards, but, he has like a multiple, I think like 6 games that are over 70 yards. Guys, I don't understand. What do you need? And certainly, if it's standard, I can understand he's not as high because he only has 2 touchdowns on the season. But in PPR, I mean, this guy's a wide receiver every week already, in my opinion. I've been playing him like that.
Nathan, so you have him all the way up at number 1. So you have him over guys like Malcolm Mitchell, over guys like my guy Tyler Lockett. So what makes you so high on Pierre Garçon? Is it basically that he's getting consistent targets?
Yeah, he's getting the targets. He's had 80 or more yards in 3 of his last 4 games. He's playing really well recently, not just fantasy, but real life as well. So I think he's doing what we would like all of these other wide receivers to do, but he's been consistently doing it recently. So he's someone that I would trust to have in my lineup right now more than I would trust anyone else out of all these receivers we're talking about.
All right, and I want to talk about Michael Floyd for a second. I seem to be the highest on him, and it's more of the fact to do with I don't know how long David Johnson can keep up these insane receiving numbers. He has more receiving
forever.
He has more receiving yards than Allen Robinson, DeAndre Hopkins, like a lot of wide receivers. I was going through it. He has, I think, going back since week 8 or something like that, there's only like 13 wide receivers that have more targets than he has receptions. Like, it's just nuts. It was a weird number that I was able to find. But David Johnson is a freak. But John Brown, they're limiting him now. They're saying they're going to limit him to 20 snaps per game. J.J. Nelson's not very good. I think Michael Floyd, with Carson Palmer starting to throw for 300 yards seemingly every single game, I think Michael Floyd is a fine play. I mean, we know that the guy's got talent. He'll be a free agent at the end of the season. So what about him rubs you the wrong way, Daniel?
It's such a crapshoot in that offense. You gave the best case scenario for him getting usage, but John Brown is still going to have some snaps. J.J. Nelson might not be great. The touchdown he scored on Sunday was amazing, but he's still going to get his targets. Larry Fitzgerald's going to be heavily targeted. Sure, maybe David Johnson fades, but we have absolutely no reason to think he's going to do that now. He's been amazing. So Michael Floyd is, the best case scenario is he's the number 3 option in an offense with a quarterback who has slightly improved lately. But another way of saying that is he's fighting for the 3rd spot with 3 or 4 other guys in an offense with a wildly disappointing quarterback. He's had 2 games of more than 36 yards since week 3. He's scored 1 touchdown in the last 7 weeks. His floor is nothing. His floor is 0 points. And that's just not something I want to invest in right now.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's just like when we're down this far in the waiver wire, I think you're looking at players that present upside. So if you're looking for a safe option, I don't think Michael Floyd's it. I actually sat him in one of my leagues this week thinking the Redskins was a tougher matchup, and he scored. But I don't know. Michael Floyd, I tend to look at talent a lot, I guess, and I just think Michael Floyd is a talented wide receiver. And Carson Palmer, if you go over the last 6 games now, that's including the 198-yard game against Minnesota. He's averaging 311 yards over his last 6 games. So Carson Palmer is throwing for more yardage, a few more touchdowns. David Johnson's going to see more men in the box than ever. So that's the thing. It's just like, I think you could definitely do worse than Michael Floyd. One player, Daniel, that you're really high on, and I'm curious to hear the case on this, it's Corey Coleman. RG3 is apparently going to start, and that actually dropped me down. Like Coleman, I was high on. I would prefer Kessler or even McCown. I think McCown would be my top choice. But RG3, I don't really know if I like Corey Coleman anymore going forward. I think I'd rather just let somebody else deal with the headache of RG3.
I went back and forth on Coleman. I had him anywhere from like 7th to 2nd. I mean, I like his talent. He's had at least 5 targets every game he's played, at least 7 in all but 2 of them. Lord help me, I still think there's talent in Robert Griffin. I don't know why I think that. I probably shouldn't think it. I want to invest in. I couldn't possibly play Coleman right now with the quarterback questions, but he's one that I could see maybe using in week 15, 16 if week 14 looks good, and that's more than I can say for a lot of these guys. I will readily admit I could be wrong in this ranking. I don't know.
So one player I want to talk about before we move on to tight ends is I want to talk to you, Nathan, about Ted Ginn. You're higher on him than me, and I'm a big fan. I think Ted Ginn, the way he's been used over the last few weeks, they're starting to use him more like they did last year, which is puzzling why they didn't do that before, taking the shots downfield. I'm going to pull up the numbers here in a second while you talk about him, but what makes you want to grab Ted Ginn over someone like Chris Hogan?
I think he's just a much safer play. Hogan's someone where I could see him scoring or getting 100 yards. I could see him getting 0 yards, and I wouldn't be surprised either way. Ginn's been very consistently getting at least 40 yards, and then he's especially been playing well recently. A big catch in each of these last few games, a touchdown in each of the last 3. So even without the touchdowns he's been scoring recently and without the big plays, he's at least getting a couple catches and at least getting 40 yards. So if you want a safer play, that's there. Plus he has that upside of he could catch a deep ball for a touchdown. So he has the opportunity for a touchdown plus the higher floor.
Yeah, well, the stat I was wanted to pull up that I knew I had in my computer here. So last year, Ted Ginn's average depth of target was 17 yards down the field. We all know that he was the deep threat. He dropped a few passes here and there, sure, but you live with that because he offered you the upside. So going into week 11 this year, that number was down to 13.0 as an average yard depth of target, which is not where that's almost like a possession type receiver area depth of target. So the way they started changing it over the last 3 weeks now, he's averaging a 17.7 average depth of target, which is massive. That means everything for him. He's going to have a little boom or bust, but he's seeing targets now. He has 1 less target than Kelvin Benjamin over the last 3 games. So, I mean, Cam Newton, he's kind of throwing up Hail Marys right now at this time. He's just played so bad. So Cam Newton, he's just taking shots down the field, and that's where Ted Ginn will succeed. So I kind of like it. Brandon, what do you think about Ted Ginn?
Yeah, well, Coach Rivera came out and said that maybe they got ahead of themselves with the Kelvin Benjamin ACL thing. I don't think it's his ACL. You know what I'm saying? I think maybe he's just not the player he thought he was, or he just needs to get back into understanding, his role in the game. I mean, it's just very clear that he's lost out there. He caught 2 of his 9 targets, I believe, last week. Just completely off. And so what they're doing is they're like, well, then screw it. Let's go to Ted Ginn. I mean, this guy's going to run down the field. Let's do it. And again, like you said, they're behind so much that, they're just pitching it down, hoping that someone catches it. They kind of have this there's nothing to lose mentality. I mean, when you sit Cam Newton for 1 play to make a point, you clearly are in a bad place. Things are not working for you as a team. So this is a little bit larger than just the fantasy numbers in my perspective. Part of the reason why I like Ted Ginn is because I'm looking at the team as a whole from a football perspective. And to me, it only makes sense that they continue doing what they're doing with Ted Ginn. I don't think it's a 3-week fluke. I think this is the new way that they're going to run this offense. And they have to, because Kelvin Benjamin, after his huge week 1 performance, because, whereas week 2 was exceptionally huge, but both of them were huge. And then he just dropped off the planet, right? And I was kind of down on Kelvin in the preseason. And at first I felt like I was an idiot, right? I was like, oh no, I was completely wrong. He's like the greatest receiver ever. And now it's all kind of coming back. But the reason why I was down is because if you remember, he was inconsistent his rookie season too. If he didn't have the excess of targets, he was not going to be as successful because he had a ton of drops. He lost focus and what have you, had a whole year off. And now we're seeing that again. So I just think that this is a Kelvin Benjamin call as much as it's a Ted Ginn call for me.
For me, my only concern with Ted Ginn is his quarterback, Cam Newton. He's been wildly inconsistent. He's had 3 straight games now where he's completed less than 50% of his passes, which is it's unacceptable as a quarterback. You can't have your quarterback doing that, especially when you have options as big as he does. You have Kelvin Benjamin, you have Devin Funchess, you have Greg Olsen. You don't throw to your running backs very often. So I don't know.
He's running Greg Olsen too.
Yeah,
Greg
Greg
Olsen is
Olsen,
officially ruined.
it's really sad.
Yeah.
I want to talk about one last receiver. Actually, I'm not going to talk about him, but I'm going to let Daniel talk about him. Daniel is pretty high on Anquan Bolden. Go ahead and state your cause for Anquan. I think you're muted, Daniel.
Oh,
Nobody wanted to hear me anyway. My bad. If Marvin Jones is going to stay out for any length of time, Bolden's going to have a big role in that offense. He played a season high in snaps this past week. I want to say, I said in the preseason all along that I didn't know why the Bills hadn't gone out and signed Bolden, and I stand by that. I think they should have. I think it'd be in the playoffs if they'd signed Anquan Bolden in the preseason. But Bolden, I don't have his numbers in front of me now. He's been dependable. He's not spectacular. But if you're looking for someone around here, he's going to have the biggest role in an offense that is productive. I'm not excited about Bolden, but I think he's going to have a better chance of productivity than a lot of the guys we've talked about who are crapshoots. Ted Ginn, you guys spent a long time on him. Despite a recent spate of consistency, it's Ted Ginn. He's very boom or bust. Bolden is less boom but less bust. He's going to give you a reliable production every week.
That's how I feel. I think he's in the area for me with Pierre Garçon. Garçon, the higher yardage total guy, probably a little bit more consistent in PPR leagues, but Bolden offers you more touchdown upside. And the remaining schedule for the Lions, it could be solid. And bringing up the Lions and the fact that they're playing the Bears this week, one thing I do want to bring up, guys, do you guys have any interest in? I'm just going to ask you each for your answers. We're going to go right down the line here. Do you have any interest in picking up Alshon Jeffrey if he's on the waiver wire? Brandon, go.
yeah, absolutely.
Daniel,
He'd be my number one ad.
Yep. Yeah.
Nathan.
Yeah.
Yeah, at this point, I think I agree. I have him.
Sigh.
I was tempted to drop him in one league, and now I'm holding just because Bears receivers are so awful. And if they're going to throw the ball, 40, 50 times a game, then I guess Alshon Jeffrey is definitely going to be playable at that time because he comes back not this week, but next week, week 15, he'll be back. So let's talk about some tight ends before we get out of here. Ladarius Green is the big story of this week, guys. Coming into this week, there was some hesitancy to start him. However, Brandon, I know we were talking about tight ends and how they've been so touchdown dependent this season. And, when you see Ladarius Green in the field for 14 snaps, 12 snaps, 8 snaps the last 3 weeks, you're like, okay, do we really trust this guy? But he was running pass routes on essentially every single snap that he played. And that continued this week. He's almost blocking less than Antonio Brown is, which is kind of crazy. So Ladarius Green, is he our consensus number one tight end pickup?
Not for me, because I'm afraid he's going to pull a Jared Cook, and this is it. No, I'm dead serious. I mean, we just have not seen consistent back-to-back good games from Ladarius Green his entire career, and I'm worried that this was a Giants are not good against the tight ends kind of situation. They're in the bottom 10 in terms of guarding against them. They gave up the most yards and catches, actually. Touchdowns, not so much. He was able to make it into the end zone, but he has Ben Roethlisberger. Moving forward, he's going up against Buffalo this week, then at Cincinnati, then Baltimore, and then Cleveland. None of those, save Cleveland in Week 17, are big at giving up, especially tight touchdowns to tight ends. So in a touchdown-dependent year for tight ends, which, by the way, I did an article this week. Again, go check it out. It's all free. For this week only. But in 2012, it was a low, right? 7.92 fantasy points per game is the average for top 10 tight ends, right? This year is 7.89 for our top 10 tight ends. And we lost Rob Gronkowski. We don't know what's going on with Jordan Reed. Zach Miller is out for the season, is still currently a tight end, top 10 tight end. I mean, we got some dire straits going on. So you need touchdowns. I don't know. I think he's fine. I'm just worried because even, Heath Miller was inconsistent and Ben Roethlisberger loved Heath Miller. Like that was his soul brother. He loved him and he still was an inconsistent tight end play. So with Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell there, that's why he is not my number one. So I'm sorry you asked me. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. That's why I wanted to get your take on it. And that's the thing. It's just so the concern here for me would be that Ben Roethlisberger's on the road for the next 2 games, which we know that Ben has struggled on the road over the last 3 years or so. So this week coming up is not really one to get excited. Buffalo's pretty good against tight ends. I have a phone call.
I have a phone call. Stupid phones.
No.
You yell at me when I'm muted. You yell at me when I'm not muted.
It's been a long time since we've gotten a phone call on Daniel's end, so it's okay. We'll live with it.
Hello?
Okay?
It was like nostalgia.
We should just answer them on the podcast, honestly. I think we should just do that next time. Just say hello.
Hello.
You want to say hi? No, so the other one on our list was CJ Fedorowicz. Daniel, where are you at in between those two, and why would you pick Ladarius Green over Fedorowicz?
I mean, where am I? You answered the question when you said, why would I pick one over the other? Fedorowicz is fine. He's going to be a top 10 tight end, but we're talking about, needing touchdowns. They're giving Ryan Griffin just as many of these touchdown looks as they are Fedorowicz. I like him, and especially in PPR because he's getting so much usage, but I think Green's touchdown upside is way higher. Like Brandon gave his schedule down the stretch, but Cincinnati's just as bad against tight ends as Cleveland. They've given up 7 touchdowns to the position. And Buffalo and Baltimore have been successful against the position, but it's been a lot of it because they haven't played anybody. When you look at what teams have given up to tight ends, a lot of what you need to look at is who they've played because there's so few good ones. And particularly Baltimore has played no decent tight ends so far. I like both of these guys. I think they're a clear tier above the rest of the waiver wire options. But Green has he's higher ceiling, lower floor, but I'm going for ceiling if I'm getting one of these guys right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at. I have Green ranked higher, but Fedorowicz is probably the safer option. Nathan, what's your take on it?
I think Green's been playing better. He has 3.9 yards per route run, which is excellent for a tight end, by far the best. 3.2 by Rob Gronkowski is the next closest. Obviously, that'll go down with more routes, but I think he's going to continue to see the targets. Where Fedorowicz, over the past 6 weeks, he has just one game over 50 yards, just one touchdown. So while he has continued to see the targets, and that's good if you're in a PPR, so he'll get the catches, he hasn't been getting the yards or the touchdowns recently. So I think Green has the higher upside, and I think he'll 177 yards and a touchdown over the past 2 weeks now that he's finally seeing playing time. So I think Green will continue to play well.
Yeah, Green, it's kind of crazy. He's played 69 snaps now this year. He has seen 19 targets on 69 snaps, which is just ridiculous. Because a lot of players, if they play 69 snaps in a game, which is possible, you're not going to see 19 targets. So definitely interesting.
But Fedorowicz is a way safer PPR play, like beyond. I mean, he is scoring the 3rd most points per opportunity in PPR leagues, only behind Rob Gronkowski and Hunter Henry, who is not on our list, but he's actually one of my favorites remainder of season. But yeah,
go ahead, make a case for Hunter Henry.
I think Hunter Henry is probably the best pass catcher and end zone threat that the Chargers have right now. And based off of the injuries that are happening at the wide receiver position and the fact that they're being, they're turning away from Antonio Gates a little bit more than I think that we thought that they would, or they're a little more diverse, I guess I should say. Now, last week he only had 1 catch for 14 yards, but before that it was 2 catches, 20 yards and a touchdown. If you want to talk about a guy with touchdown upside, he's missed, multiple weeks and he still has 5 touchdowns on the season. He's one of the highest scoring quarterbacks per opportunity, 2nd in both standard and PPR. So if he's going to be on the field, listen, the Tampa Bay game, it's weird. Tampa Bay's defense, it's a very weird, thing that's happening over there. So I'm not going to look too much into it. But this week they're at Carolina. Then Oakland, okay, and then at Cleveland. Again, it's all about matchups and it's all about touchdowns. His schedule is perfect.
I think Antonio Gates catches 2 touchdowns this weekend.
Yeah, because they want to get him the record, but they still get Hunter Henry in there at the same time, though.
So we're running out of games here, and Antonio Gates is 2 off the record to tie and 3 to break it. So I'm calling it a lock that Antonio Gates catches 3 touchdowns by the end of the season. They wanted to do that. He's going to retire. Phillip Rivers, their season is it's down the tubes. Nathan, are they in the playoff run right now? Do they even have a shot at the playoffs?
Not a good chance, no. A very, very slight one at the wild card, but there's just too many good teams in the AFC West alone. Yeah,
that's basically what I thought. And the thing is, Carolina has been awful against tight ends too, so I think this is the perfect match to get Gates those touchdowns. He may have a Dwayne Allen type game this week, honestly. I like Gates this week, and he's obviously not available on many waiver wires, but
Hunter Henry in all but 1 game has scored a touchdown along with Antonio Gates.
Yeah,
they actually both scored touchdowns in the same game.
Hunter Henry's going to be really good, I think. I think he's going to fill that Gates role extremely well. I think he can stretch the field more than Gates can. I think it's going to be fun to watch Hunter Henry with Phillip Rivers. One player Man, Daniel, let's talk about Dennis Pitta. Coming into this week, he was a guy that had the most yards among any player and no touchdowns. He was the only, like, what do you have, over 500 yards with no touchdowns? So this had to be coming, right?
Yeah, it was one of those, you get enough yards, eventually something happens. The second one was also nice to see. I love Dennis Pitta just for the fact that his career should be over now. He should not be playing football, and he's made an amazing comeback. But I said it to you on the recap show on Sunday. He's one of a group of 10 to 15 tight ends who are going to have a week with 80 yards and a score, or like he did this week, and we're going to say, oh, is he a tight end one now? And no, he's going to have 3 more weeks of 40 yards and no score, or 25 yards and maybe a touchdown. He's interesting in the you're absolutely desperate and need somebody mold, but I'm not thinking that anything like that's going to be a new normal. He's not going to be tight end consistently at all.
So I think this is going to be fun. We're gonna talk about this real quick here. So Jermaine Gresham has been seeing a lot of targets lately, like a lot more than people realize. He now has, what was the number? I had it written down here. He has seen 32 targets over his last 6 games. So in our little spreadsheet here, Daniel went in and wrote, yes, there are only 5 tight ends here on the list, but Gresham is so far behind the others. Nathan chimed in and said Nathan disagrees. I just like parentheses. Nathan, make your case for Jermaine Gresham, and let's see what Daniel's rebuttal would be.
Yeah, we've been doing the format of this show wrong. We can't keep ending on these bottom of the tier tight end types to end the show each week, but we're doing it again. But Gresham, each of the last 5 games, he's had at least 30 yards, 2 touchdowns in his last 3 games, and at least 5 catches in each of his last 2. So he's been seeing the targets. It's converted into catches and some yards and a few touchdowns, and that's more consistent than what we see out of most tight ends recently. So just if you need someone who will get you a couple of points at the tight end position, he's someone you can play, but obviously like Fedorowicz and Green a lot better.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Daniel, is there any rebuttal to this?
He's topped 38 yards once since week 1. We talked about the same thing with Michael Floyd. He's definitely behind David Johnson. He's definitely behind Larry Fitzgerald. He's probably behind Floyd. He's probably behind J.J. Nelson. He's one of a whole lot of mouths to feed in what is a decent offense, but it's Jermaine Gresham. We know what we're in for with him. He's going to have 30 yards, and you're hoping for a score. Woo.
Oh, man.
State of the tight ends, right? So
it really is.
that actually is a top 10 tight end. First of all. Second of all, since the bye week, that's really when his production is picked up. I actually think he is ahead of Michael Floyd in terms of the pecking order. I think that he is behind Larry Fitzgerald and David Johnson right now. I think he's the number 3 look on almost all of the plays. If you go and you look at what's been happening, I think they've made a shift. They're trying to kind of salvage the season. So that's why I'm also in Gresham. And I'm bringing it up again. Guys, Hunter Henry is where you should be looking over all of these guys. And I just want to say he's the number 12 tight end ahead of Gates in standard scoring. He is in the top 15 for PPR as well. And he missed 2 games. So just FYI, I'm not crazy, but I think Gresham, though, out of all these guys, I think that he's actually gone up in terms of where he is seen in the pecking order on his team. Whereas like Fedorowicz is at the same, but Brock Osweiler is not good. Ladarius Green, they're going to target him when he's on, but they don't trust him to be on the field that often. Dennis Pitta has always had the targets. This is the first time he scored a touchdown since 2013, and so he scored 2. For good measure. And then, we haven't even mentioned Gary, but poor Gary. And so Jermaine is the only one who's actually gone up in, where he is in pecking order, in my opinion. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's definitely a dearth.
It's kind of trending in the way of Fedorowicz, kind of, where in the first few weeks he didn't see very many targets, and now he's consistently seeing like 6 targets a game. So yeah. I think Gresham should be taken into consideration if you're looking for a desperation option, and someone like Fedorowicz or Ladarius Green is not on your waiver wire, or your waiver wire priority is just down the list. But I think that's where we're going to end the show today, guys. There were a whole lot of fun names. Nathan, I'm sorry we ended up on this tight end note. So just because you're sad about that, I'm going to let you give away your Twitter handle first.
Yeah, so I am at PFF_Nate Jahnke. That's PFF_NATEJAHNKE.
Daniel, good luck starting Colin Kaepernick. I really wish you luck, my friend. Go ahead and give your Twitter handle.
My Twitter handle right now is do not pick up Jermaine Gresham. It's at Daniel T. Kelley, and that's with an EY.
And Brandon, you want to go ahead and give yours. And by the way, Brandon is feeling under the weather. So when she said she was drugged up earlier, don't take that as like she was like cracked out or something.
I almost jumped in. I almost said something.
Oh, sorry. That's kind of an effect of it, I guess. I'm like, whatever, loose lips. I meant with Sudafed. No, nothing else in here. That'd be too much for me. Yes, at Brandon, her FFB. Guy's name, I'm a girl, I promise. Her FFB is in her fantasy football. Thanks.
And I am at Mike Tagliere NFL. Hit us up with any questions if you guys have any. But thank you, as always, for tuning in. We really appreciate you guys viewing in. And make sure to go to PFF this week, guys. All of our articles are free this week. So check it out. See if it's something that, if you haven't decided to purchase yet, maybe you may. And it carries over for a year, so it would carry into next year. So let us know what you think. And we'll see you guys next week. Until next time, lights out.